Hello, all. Welcome to the first of the many webinars that Ask Sheldon will be hosting. The objective of these webinars is to burst some of the myths about college admissions, hear it from the experts on how to take you from confusion to confidence, and simplify the entire process. My name is Lavanya Pureddy, founder and CEO of AskSheldon.ai. It's a college counselor app that can help students, parents, and counselors navigate through college counseling by providing support via identifying the right college fit for you, help with essay reviews, and get the right financial aid or scholarship information. I will be the moderator for this webinar. The format of this session will include a 45-minute panel discussion with the panelists and then open it out to Q&A from the audience. If you have any questions as follow-ups to the responses of the panelists, please feel free to post it in the chat and I will ask them on your behalf. This session will be recorded and shared eventually. I'd like to kick off the session by introducing our first panelist. Nichalous Archibald is a veteran educator with over 15 years of experience as a school counselor, high school principal, and district leader. He has designed and led comprehensive counseling programs that expand college and career access for students, particularly those from historically underserved communities. Nick has trained and mentored future school counselors at the university level and currently serves as program director for the Alameda County Office of Education's School Counselor Residency Program, preparing the next generation of equity driven counselors. Welcome to the panel, Nick.
Thank you.
Let's start with you. Let's start by giving our families a real behind the scenes look in the college application process. In your experience, what is the biggest challenge you face supporting students that they and their families throughout the college application process?
Well, I think there's a lot that goes on with that process, and there's a lot of things that are complicated about it. But when we think about students and when we think about families, I would say one of the things that I see often is that there is a lack of understanding of what each person is looking for in that process. So, we have the student who is on site at the school site, working with the school counselor, and they have a vision that is very different than maybe what their parent, their families, their guardian is looking for. And so I think that oftentimes what's difficult is reconciling that disconnect where you might have a student who's saying, I want to go away. I want to be far away from home. I want to live on campus. And when you have family members who are saying, hey, I don't know if that's the best idea. I think that living close to home and maybe we cannot afford the cost of living on campus. And so that is just one scenario. But when those two things are not aligned, then I think it creates difficulty with figuring out what is the best solution, as a unit for the student and the family.
I absolutely agree. I see a similar scenario playing out in my house every single day where the student and the parent are not on the same page. On that note, I'd like to introduce our second panelist on today's session. Siddharth is an incoming freshman at Stanford University, interested in pursuing a degree in biomedical computation or a related field. He's originally from Portland, Oregon, but he relocated to the Bay Area last year and graduated from Hillsdale High School in San Mateo. He has had extensive involvement in scientific research throughout high school, but pursued other interests like basketball, piano, and immigration justice as well. That is a lot, Siddharth, that you've accomplished. Welcome to the panel.
Thank
Um,
you.
a segue from what Nick mentioned about how the challenges between supporting students and their families, what has been the most confusing or stressful part of your college application process for you?
I would actually agree with him quite a bit. I think the pressure from family to approach things a certain way, or maybe even that sometimes parents don't fully understand the college admissions process the way I might or my peers might. It's harder to communicate with your parents about the process when they don't have like a fundamental understanding. And for me, like my parents grew up in India, right? So it's a completely different college system. So they don't know some of the things that I might have thought would be just general knowledge, but it's actually not. So I think that created a lot of stress in my household last year and is something that is pretty difficult to resolve, but eventually you get there after enough conversations.
And we're seeing a lot of first generation immigrant students now enrolling in college application process. So I completely agree with you. Nick, the journey to college has so many moving parts, from researching schools, writing essays, navigating financial aid forms, and even managing the emotional experience of it all. How do school counselors effectively manage these competing priorities for so many students, especially knowing that you're supporting more than 400, 500 students every year? How do you do it?
I don't know if there's one answer to kind of address that process for folks. I think that scenario is really based on the individual, their particular skill sets and strengths, and also the school that they're working at and the expectations of what the school needs from the school counselor. And so I think that will differ from state to state, from region to region, from school to school, even in school districts. Um, but I think what's important is that the school counselor and the ideally the administrator, the principal of that school really has a connection with what is the goal, what are the needs of the students in that particular community. And I think from there, it's really the responsibility of school counselors to be flexible, to understand what those needs are, and to adjust to those needs based on their particular context of the school community. So um, I, I can't really say that there is one answer to do that, but I would say if I am generalizing around like what is most helpful, I think that understanding where students are in terms of, their transcript, what they're looking for in terms of, what their vision is for themselves outside of high school and beyond. And then having some sense and understanding of what their family, situation is. So what are the, um, abilities or inabilities of families to provide support financially, social, emotionally for the things that they're looking for. Um, I hope that's not too complex, but I think
It,
that that's where I'm landing with that.
the whole process is complex and it's hard for
Yes.
parents like me to navigate. Nick, any specific example that really stands out in your past experience where you really had to like circumvent all of that and then really support, like one of the most challenging things that you had to do, like a specific example that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's most common is when a student is very set on, hey, I am ready to leave this place, my home. I'm ready to leave this region, and I want to go away a bit. I want to go away far enough to where it feels like I am independent and I'm on my own and I am kind of figuring things out on my own. And then when you have families that are like, hey, my child, I need them to stay close to home. They are not ready to do that, or we need them here for whatever reason. We need them close to home because they are a part of the family structure that's really important. They play an important role, and them leaving will be a detriment to our family and our structure. And so, when you have those two visions that are not aligned, I think that that is something that is very common and is very difficult to reconcile. But as a school counselor, I think that's why it's really important that connection with the student, but also connection with the family, is something that's really, really important.
Right. And I think said your parents probably are feeling very grateful that you're going to be close to home. You're in the Bay Area and you're going to be studying in the Bay Area at Stanford. But I don't know how much this ever played. But then a very specific question about did you ever feel unsure about whether you're on track or are you missing something in your senior year in terms of your college application process? And how did location even play a role in what you were doing?
Okay, so kind of two questions then.
Yeah. Sorry, I wanted to get a segue from Nick's
Yeah.
response and see how that played into your decision-making process. But then, how did that help you kind of plan the whole thing?
I think my kind of mindset on location changed a lot throughout the process. Originally, well, since I moved my after junior year, before senior year, and I really did not like moving, I kind of thought that I want to be close enough to home to where I don't have to experience that much change again twice in a row. But later on, I kind of distanced myself from that. So I ended up applying mostly on the West Coast. I think I applied to like 17 schools and 13 of those were West Coast and four were East Coast. And then it ended up happening that like I got my top choice, which was Stanford. So that made the decision a little bit easier. But by the time I was getting acceptances, I thought it would be better to like leave the area. And I always didn't want to be in the Bay Area, especially 20 minutes from home. It's like really, really close. I kind of wanted a bit of independence, but um, I think it's okay because the campus is insulated. I'm not living at home, so that was okay. In terms of feeling behind on things, I think I had pretty good structure with college admissions, but one thing that I kind of fell behind on a lot was scholarships because it's not as structured, right? There's no common app portal and it's hard to find things. It's hard to stay organized. And I didn't even start looking until like spring and everything had already closed. So that's definitely something that I wish I had better structure with, and I'll try and start early this year.
I'm going to flex there that Ask Sheldon actually has more information on scholarships and financial aid. But and I did hear about an infamous story about Siddharth on how he submitted his Stanford application 10 minutes prior to the deadline. Did you feel that heat and pressure from the parents saying, "Hey, have you submitted your application yet?"
Well, actually, I did submit my application well in advance, but it was I got deferred. So they have a defer update form, and it was I think the weekend of Valentine's Day, and I had like a gathering to go to, right? So I brought my computer to like finish my essays to the gathering, and it was due at midnight, and I submitted at like 11:45.
I heard
So
that story,
yeah,
Siddharth.
I don't think my mom was too happy about that one, but it all worked out.
The story of our lives, and I'm glad it worked out. Nick, in your experience, have you seen students slip through the cracks during college application process? And if there's any specific example that comes to your mind, what were some of the factors that contributed on why that happened? And looking back and with the support and resources or changes, what could have made a difference for those students so that they didn't fall through any of those cracks during the process? A lot of our parents would love to know that.
Yeah, I would say for me personally, one of the biggest things is that I think it's really key for young people or people in general to be able to envision the future that they want for themselves. And I think that sometimes when you have students, particularly first generation college students who haven't had family members or parents go through that process where they can have seen someone in their lives, be in higher education, then it does, I think, create a sense of believability that that is something that they could do. So I think that is one thing that is a hurdle for folks just from a philosophical standpoint, being able to see something that you want but haven't seen it before, then it's hard to envision it for yourself. Um, and then I think overall that sometimes that there is, unfortunately, our systems are set up in a way, and Siddharth, you can definitely chime in on this one because I do think that there is a disconnect between what you learn in high school and what it takes to be successful in college. And all the skills that it takes to be a successful high school student aren't necessarily the skills that align with success in college. And I think as I think about myself as a college student and a lot of the students that I support, sometimes a big part of the learning curve is how do I translate success in high school to success in college, because those things aren't necessarily the same thing. And so, it's a part of kind of figuring out this process of being in a huge lecture hall. I'm in a biology class and there's 250 kids in this class, and my teacher's not talking to me after class individually, right? Like, how do I reconcile that? And so that's just one example of it. But I think those are some of the kind of the major factors that students engage with and experience. And I think it creates challenges. And sometimes, kind of like Siddharth said, that sometimes families who haven't been through that, it's difficult for them to be there as a guide for their child or family member to really help them through some of that, because all of that is new. And so it's really trial and error, which can be difficult for a lot of folks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking about falling through the cracks, Siddharth, how did you make sure that you didn't fall through the cracks? Like, how did you get help with your essays, applications, or planning your college list?
Um, this was more pushed by my mom than me, but she wanted me to have like a private counselor. In retrospect, I don't know how helpful it was to have one. I do think they did a good job with like helping me create a college list and reviewing essays and everything. but was it worth the cost? In my opinion, probably not because of the amount of resources available online. And now with AI and everything, you can get essay reviews for free and very high quality ones, right? So I don't know how worth it was to do that. But another thing that I did on my own was I started pretty early. I was starting to write my essays pretty much as soon as the Common App opened in August. And so that gave me enough time.
I hope all the kids actually stay as motivated as you did, Siddharth. Um, um, Nick, in your experience, what do students struggle the most during the college application process that as a parent, as families, I might not even be able to see? Like I am not privy to that, but then I feel so burnt out with all of this, but the kids are struggling. And what do you think in your interaction with the kids, that single most challenging thing that kids struggle with? And why do you think these challenges often go unnoticed by parents or by the educators?
Well, I think one of the things which I'll repeat again and leave as is just this idea of what they believe is possible for themselves. I think that that is something that is again I think a huge part of the process and what creates like that motivation to kind of move forward with the process. But if we're talking about logistics of the process, it's quite complex when you think about what are my A through G requirements? Have I met all of them? When I think about have I taken the SAT or ACT, or maybe I'm applying to schools that don't require testing. When I'm thinking about what majors am I interested in, maybe I don't know, maybe I do know. What universities are best equipped to support those things that I want in terms of academic experience. When you think about distance, how far do I want to go? Do I want to commute? Do I want to stay close to home? Do I want to go far away? And so I really think that there are so many components of the process that it can be quite difficult to do that individually on your own, and particularly as a teenager, it can be quite difficult to think so far ahead of. I think sometimes as adults, when we get to the point where we can be like, okay, I'm going to plan my week and I have my calendar and I can think ahead of what it is that I want to see for myself. And then you can kind of succinctly put the pieces together that enable you to get to that point, right? Like, I need to go to school and get this degree because I want to be in this particular job. And I think sometimes for teenagers, it's not that easy. And so I think putting all those components together in a way that makes sense, I think that can be difficult. And for every student, family, that individual process of figuring it out can be different and challenging on their own.
Right. In my own personal experience, Nick, I've seen absolutely that thing happen. We engaged a private counselor when my son was in ninth grade, the counselor was biased. I think I wouldn't ding him on it, but he was biased about this is a kid in the Silicon Valley and of parents of Indian descent, and he assumed that my son wanted to do engineering, and my son was wanting to do anything but engineering. So that kind of misunderstanding of their goals and not being able to track to them. And then my son had to kind of have a conversation with me to say, Mom, would you be ashamed of me if I didn't do engineering because I'm not interested in it? And that's where I felt there was a disconnect where they couldn't voice what they wanted, but they had certain things in mind. And then we kind of regrouped back on it. But I agree with what you're saying in terms of disconnect between families and students always having a challenge to explain themselves on what their goals are, what they want to do, and feeling they're not probably being supported. On that note, Sid, have you ever hesitated to reach out to your counselor? I know you spoke about a private counselor, but I'm sure you also had a high school counselor, both college counselor and a school counselor at Hillsdale. But did you ever hesitate reaching out to your counselor, and if so, why?
I don't think I interacted with my counselor all that much, mainly because, like I said, I moved here senior year, so I had no prior relationship with them. At my old school, I went to the counselor a little bit here and there, but I know people that made much better use of their school counselor than I did personally, and I think I explained why. Yeah,
Okay, so but there wasn't anything about being judged or not being supported that played into you not reaching out to your counselors?
not particularly for me. Yeah.
Sounds great. Um, just pivoting a little bit, Nick, what advice would you give to parents like me who are feeling overwhelmed trying to support their children through the college journey. Are there steps that we can take to make the process feel more manageable while staying engaged and supportive, especially for first generation parents like me?
This is my personal opinion, so I do want to preface this by saying that is that I sometimes think that as parents, and I'm also a parent. My son is 10. He's not a college, uh, pre-college student yet, but I do think that sometimes as parents we take on a lot of responsibility and onus of figuring out how to support our children. And I think that sometimes it's important to kind of just let go and allow the folks that are the experts, the school counselors, the folks at our schools. Siddharth, you mentioned kind of having, some additional support. Sometimes I think when if you haven't had that experience or you don't have the information, that is totally okay. And there are people that are there to support you. So as a parent, it's about really, creating that connection with the folks that are there to support your student, person, family member, and to be there to kind of be there with them. So you don't have to be the one to tell them or support them or create the advice, but you can work alongside folks that are experienced to do that. And I think for the young people, sometimes, Siddharth, you can definitely chime in, but I think there is this thing that sometimes when the messenger matters, so, your mom, dad, family member, auntie, uncle could be telling you something. And because they are the one explaining it to you, you're kind of like, all right, well, I'm not sure about that. But then you go to school and your school counselor says this exact same thing, or someone else, your coach, your peer, or someone says the exact same information, maybe slightly different, and you have a different reaction to it, and you can embrace it and hold it in a different way. And so I think that it requires for both folks, because it's a team effort for the young person that is looking for what they're going to do post high school, and also for the family that's helping them is figuring out how to have that conversation in a way that makes sense for each other, because sometimes just because it's mom, dad saying it, I don't want to hear it. And sometimes as a parent, sometimes when your young person is saying something to you, you're like, are you sure? I'm not sure if that makes sense. Right? You're challenging because maybe that's the experience that you've had for a long time.
So I'm hearing let go, trust the process, trust the experts. And finally, the three words I always tell my son, probably Siddharth heard it from his mom, that says, I told you. So
but don't say it in that way, because then that's they're right.
Yeah.
It's
right.
finding the way that makes sense for them to embrace the message that you're trying to share.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
To just continue off of that, I completely agree. And I think the biggest reason you don't want to hear it from your mom or dad, or vice versa, that your parents don't want to hear it from you, is because there's already so much tension between you guys during this whole process that, like, if somebody commands something to you or says something with force, you're already just automatically repulsed by it. So having other outside sources of information and authority like really helps alleviate stress from the process.
I agree. Amit, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. By the way, thanks for taking time, Lavanya, Siddharth, and Nicholas. Um, Nicholas, the question is more coming from what you mentioned. I think what you said of let the experts do, um, it might be colored by what level of proficiency and expertise and uh, you have seen from your side. Imagine that there in the world there are all sort of people who are supporting each other. They are not at the same level. Some of them are overwhelmed. Some of them are just trying to do that as a part-time job. What advice would you have for parents who are trying to balance that? And it's all about and what guardrails can we have to catch before things get too late? And Siddharth, you can feel free to chime in as well. Um, my daughter, to give a background, my daughter is already a senior in college in Maryland in College Park, and my son is a rising high school senior in Lynbrook. I'm in West San Jose. So I have some idea about it, but I've seen all sort of like people to deal with, and the risk is pretty high, right? If you are late and you miss things.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I think a lot of this stuff is so nuanced that, again, I don't want to respond to something to make folks feel like there is the answer. There isn't one way to do it. So when I am responding to it, I'm kind of giving, hopefully folks are hearing some things that may resonate with them. And I think it depends on your young person. It depends on you. It depends on so many factors. But I think some of the things that are important is one is having a connection with your school community, and the folks that work at your school. So we're talking about the school counselor. We're talking about the teachers, the administrator, the principals. It's about understanding where your young person is going to school. Um, for me, as a someone who I was a school counselor and a principal, for me, I love popping up at my son's school at random times, not at drop-offs and pickups. I like to come at 11:32 and see like what's happening here. I want to pop in at 2:15 and say, hey, I really want to talk to the school counselor. I have a question. And I want to look at what's going on, observe availability, how folks are responding to me. So that's one. Um, Two, I think what's also important, aside from the connection and the community aspect that I think can exist with the folks that are there, because I think that creates a trust, right? When you know who the school counselor is, when you know who the teachers are, those things create trust. But as a parent, we have to know a couple of things that I think are very important. And this part, I think, is true throughout. Logistically, you got to know when the report cards come out. You got to know when folks are assessing where your student is. So when are grades coming out? When are the marking periods coming out? So that you can kind of see, hey, how are you doing? What are the grades looking like? And I think that for a lot of parents, those are things that sometimes we rely on our young people to tell us. Oftentimes they're not gonna give us that information, or sometimes, to be honest, they don't know. They're not paying attention to it. So that is something that I think is very key. Whether you are on a trimester situation, a semester situation, or on a quarter situation, those are three, very different ways that students are graded. And as a parent, I think knowing how that goes is important to provide the support, because then you can kind of see where students are. Like, are they failing math or English early on? Do they need a tutor? Do they need support? Do I need to talk to their school counselor? All of those things. So I would say, just generally speaking, understanding the marking period and the grading period for your student, and then also just building a connection with the people that are there to support your young person, would be the two things that I would highlight as the most key things that you could leverage to provide the most support for your student.
Um, to add on to that, very practically speaking, just for like the college admissions process, I would suggest your son, or yeah, your son, right? Create a spreadsheet that has all the schools that he's going to be applying to, and also all the essays required for each of those schools, and share the spreadsheet with you. And then as he's making progress, he can update the status of each essay for each school. And that'll be like a good way to stay organized. A little bit type A of me, but and the other thing I'd say is like let him miss some stuff, because if you are always on his case to remind him for things and he never learns the hard way to like stay organized in his own way, it'll just continue on. You're not always going to be there to support him. And also it'll be a point of tension in your guys' relationship in his last year at home, realistically. And so I would say that it's okay for him to make a few mistakes right now. I know like college admissions is high stakes, but I don't know. I think it's a learning curve that we all have to deal with on our own at some point.
So that on that point, when you talk about last year with the parents, and Nick, please feel free to jump in on this as well. Do students, and said, did you feel this pressure of I have to leave home after a certain point of time? Maybe kids are not ready to leave home, but when parents or the community keeps talking about, oh, where are you headed, and you'll be living by yourself, are you ready to face the world? And maybe some students are not, and we see an increased amount of pressure on students, and they're trying to either get into like self-harming or suicides and all of that we keep hearing about in the community. Did you um, do you feel pressure to leave home, and are you feel like do you feel like you're ready, or you heard of friends who are not ready but they feel like they have this immense pressure to leave home and be by themselves?
Um, I think in my personal experience, I haven't met people that haven't wanted to leave home. And I think in California, as opposed to Oregon, there's a lot of respect for the community college to UC route. So a lot of people do end up staying at home just because that's like a really practical option and it's a good option. And it's actually, I've, in my experience at least, it's pretty respected here. Back in Oregon, it was definitely not like the community college was kind of made fun of as like a bad route or like kind of a failure type of thing, right? Like people would say, "Oh, you're PCC, Portland Community College bound," if you're like just to joke around or whatever. But here, I think there's a lot of respect for that. And then what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
How have you heard of people who go into depression and they feel they're not
Oh.
ready, but how do they cope, or how did you prepare yourself?
Uh, I haven't heard of extreme mental health episodes based off college admissions, but I've definitely seen like the stress take a toll on my peers. Just in fact, like just seeing burnout or obvious signs of stress, but I've never seen it taken that far, at least in my personal experience, but I'm sure it happens. Um, I don't really know like what the way around it is because they're just like the fact is that like especially in the Bay Area, especially in Asian communities, there's a lot of competition culture and like a certain expectation on younger people to excel. And I don't know. Personally, it never got to that level. I don't really know what can be done about that. Yeah.
Nick, anything that you want to talk about on this topic?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick that I think for people in general, I was going to say young people, but I think adults suffer from this as well. Is you know, we look around at what people are doing around us, and a lot of times that can kind of dictate what we feel we're supposed to be doing or what we should be doing. And I think that for me, what I try to preach for everyone is that figure out what works best for you. My best friend went to community college. I went away immediately to school. I went to school in upstate New York, and he went to community college for a couple years and then transferred to the same school I went to. So we graduated. We sat next to each other in graduation, which was amazing. But he had a lot less loans than I did. And so that was something coming from an immigrant family and first generation college student. It was something I often looked at and I was like, oh man, you don't have loans like that? And yeah, I went to community college for the first, and I paid for that out of pocket. And I was taking out loans for the first few years. So I think that's just one example, but you got to do what works for you. And there are so many ways to reach the goal. And it's not necessarily, you know, one path. So we have to find the path that works best for us.
Absolutely. Sid, most important question, and I keep wondering about it. 11th grade, they say is the hardest, but I feel 12th grade, kind of balancing your AP courses. I'm sure you've taken a bunch of them in the 12th grade too, but how did you balance your homework, your AP courses, your essays, and your applications, extracurriculars, everything, and college applications? What was the method to your madness?
In all honesty, uh, 11th grade was probably 10 times harder than 12th grade for me. And part of the reason was switching schools. I think my old schools, like the teachers were much more rigorous, the curriculum was more rigorous. And then my public school here was like a lot more laid back. I had a lot of leeway with deadlines. They didn't take it too seriously and limited homework. And also, a lot of the course offerings were not as advanced in certain subjects as maybe they were back in Portland. So my course load wasn't that bad this year. And since I started early, like I said, on essays, it was pretty manageable. In general though, like 11th grade, it was really hard to stay organized. And honestly, there's no way around it, right? You have a certain amount of time and you have a certain amount of work, and you can't be working all of your time because you'll just go insane, right? So you have to lose out on something. Sometimes that means some work doesn't get done. Sometimes that means you sleep less. Sometimes that means you have to skip a hangout with your friends, right? I don't think there's really a way around it other than using some systems. I think in high school we have Canvas. It's pretty, or most schools at least will have Canvas, so it's pretty structured there, and I think you just have to push through.
Okay. And Nick, any final words for parents, students, and educators as we get into the college admission season?
I think one of the things that I would encourage folks to do is to really try to listen and tap into what the experience of the young person they're trying to support is. I think for me, as I recall my time as a teenager and young person, often felt like I couldn't express myself. If I said something that I was, gonna do, even if it was wrong, that there was gonna be someone kind of yelling at me or getting down on me or put me down, and so it really just made me feel like I couldn't express myself. And so for families, I think that in the best way that you can, if you can create an environment where the young person, daughter, son, child, niece, nephew can feel like they can tell you what they're thinking. I think that's always going to be the best scenario, because getting the truth of what they're feeling is going to be the best way to support them. And then also understanding that like nothing's permanent. No matter what decision is made, you can go to a college, you can transfer, you can move closer to home, you can, be on campus and then not be on campus. And so just understand that as much as the stuff feels high stakes, understand that there is no decision that is final and permanent. And so if you understand that later on that maybe we should have did something different, then pay attention and you could always pivot to do something different.
I absolutely love that, Nick. We should be able to pivot. We are never at a point of no return. And I think as parents and students, we really, really, really have to understand and grain it and make sure that we follow and continue to follow that because we are never at a point of no return. So thank you for emphasizing on that. And said, a final question for you. If you had to go back 365 days prior to this and say, I want to redo this all over again, what would you continue to do the same thing or what would you change about your process?
I'd probably change a lot. I think, like, very, very practically, right? One thing was just writing essays and like the way I approached it. I think before I started writing essays, I started reading like dozens of examples online. And after a while, you kind of realize they all have the same, I just call it like the college essay tone. They all have like the same rhythm to them and they all wrap up in the same cute way. And you're like, oh, cute, right? But like after a while, you got to realize like these admissions counselors are reading like thousands of these essays and they all leave you with that same kind of feeling. And in my opinion, I kind of realized this by the end, like probably even after I was done with all my college admissions and I was starting to write some scholarship applications. I started realizing like how to write in my own voice. And people talk about this all the time. And I think it takes so long to put your finger on what that actually is, especially because of the amount of outside influence on like the way that you're writing, right? Like I mentioned, I don't think that college counselor I got was worth it because in one way they like pushed me towards that same tone that everyone's using. And I was able to write better on my own with no external influence. So that's one thing in a practical sense. Another thing, like I said, would to be to look at scholarships early. I completely missed out on that, and I wish I would have done that much, much in advance. And let me think. One more thing that I did that I regret is, like I mentioned, I got deferred from Stanford, and I actually got deferred from USC as well. Uh, and that was kind of like a double whammy because I went into that thinking I was like some that's probably cocky, but I was a little bit confident that I'd get at least one of the two. And yeah, that's very cocky in retrospect. But after that happened, I really panicked and I added like 10 colleges to my list to like hedge my bets. And I got so inundated with the amount of essays to write. Like my family had a trip to Europe planned for winter break, and I was there every day after we were done with sightseeing, writing essays. This may be what mom told you about.
No, she didn't, but thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like grinding these essays out there at on the plane, at the airport, everywhere. And it kind of ruined like my trip just because I was so stressed out about the worst case scenario that I don't get into any school that I want to go. And in reality, I was applying to schools I didn't want to go to anyways. So I wish I never did that. And I just stuck to like these are the places that I would actually be happy at, and I'm okay with that. And the worst case scenario is I get in somewhere I don't really want to go, and then I can try and transfer, and it would be fine anyways.
Maybe then I should hold off on the winter vacation I'm planning for my son. And maybe it's not going to be worth the money because he probably will be doing the same thing, writing the essays during the
Hopefully he's done.
vacations.
I would have been done if I didn't panic and out all those schools, is what I'm trying to say. And
Right.
I wish I didn't do that.
That's very candid. Nick, I know Sid mentioned about using AI tools and using that and doing better. How would you caution both parents and students from using versus not using AI technology? Because I think a lot of essays or anything that gets written using this technology would be detrimental to their applications or their acceptance. Any last word cautions on how to leverage technology versus how not to leverage technology?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. Siddharth, really quick before I get to that, I know you mentioned deferred a few times. Can you just kind of share a little bit about what, for folks that may not be familiar with that terminology, what does it mean to be deferred
Yeah.
from, Stanford or wherever you were deferred from?
Right. So you can apply to a school either early or regular decision. And if you apply early, there's three possible outcomes. One is they reject you, two is they accept you, and three is that they defer you. And that just means that they consider you with the regular decision pool. So your application just gets pushed till spring or whenever they release regular decisions.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that there is an opportunity to early on say, this is a school that I'm really interested in, and it is a little bit earlier than the typical application process. And so
Yeah.
the three options from that process is what you just mentioned. And if you're deferred, then what they're saying is, hey, we're not sure yet, but we're going to move you to the regular timeline that we accept students, and then we'll think about you again.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for explaining that. Um, Lavanya, can you just answer now? I
Before
kind of got into that, and I
before
want to
that,
make sure I answer the
can we
question.
go a bit more into the current topic, Lavanya?
Which is the
Yes, I have a follow-up
Sure.
question. So that could you also give an idea, since you mentioned ED at USC and Stanford, what major were you leaning at? And then Nicholas, it'll be good to get your view on um, ED versus regular, right? Um, Given these are competitive and not everybody will get deferred like Siddharth did.
Let me clarify really quick. So I didn't
Yeah,
ED. So there's three ways to apply early. One
yeah,
is early action, which is
mm,
that you apply early and there's no restrictions on what you can do. You can
binding.
apply to other schools. You can get accepted to the school that you applied early to and not choose it, right? So that's one. Then there's restrictive early action, which is you apply early action and you're not forced to go there if you get in, but you cannot apply to other private schools early. And then the third is early decision, which is you're binded to go to that school if you're accepted, right? So hopefully that clears things up. I was applying just like it wasn't the same major for every school. It was generally like the biomedical engineering field. So like I mentioned, or I think Lavanya mentioned earlier, I applied biomedical computation to Stanford, but I think most of my other schools were um, computational biology or biomedical engineering, depending on what they offered.
Can you repeat the question that you had for me specifically?
Right.
Yeah.
So, like Siddharth, as he clarified, went with, I believe, early action. He didn't mention
Mhm.
if he went with the restricted version or not. What are the pros and cons? Like, when should students really consider early action in particular because it's not binding as ED? Th- and I don't want it preferably not to be colored by Siddharth's, capability and his application because he got deferred. Not everybody will. Many of them will
Yeah.
get straight rejection.
But I definitely encourage folks to kind of just familiarize themselves with the different versions of what that is. Ultimately, I think I think often as someone who's been in education, I can lean into these terminologies that for me feel normal and common, and I can say, yeah, early action, early decision, but oftentimes I have to remind myself that what does that mean for folks that are not in this space, and how can they reconcile and understand what that really means. And so if I am going to kind of simplify what Siddharth said, it's really just about um, uh, how much do you want to be with us? So it's like, we have room and space for you to be a part of this thing. How badly do you want to be a part of this thing? Do you want to be a part of this thing so much that you'll gamble and say, hey, this is it. This is the thing that I want to do. It's this or bust. Or it's like, I'm really interested. And if not, then I have other options. or hey, I am just kind of testing the field and I'm interested, and if you guys accept me, then this is a place that I will highly consider. And so that's kind of the way that for me personally, I would kind of, just to say that out loud in order for folks who might be seeing the video recording of this or whatever to really understand what that means. In terms of my advice for it, again, everything is so individually based. I think it depends on where you stand in terms of the biggest thing that I would say is, where do you stand in terms of the requirements that this particular university, college typically accepts students? So where are your SAT, ACT scores? Where is your GPA in relation to what they typically accept students at? When you are above that, right? If let's say the place is looking for a 3.5 and a 1000 SAT, and you have a 4.0 and a 1500 on your SAT, then you are now in a position of power. And then when you're in a position of power, you can gamble a little bit. But when you are either right on target, and let's say they're 1500, you're a 1450, and they set the 3.5 and you're a 3.48, then maybe you're right on target. If you're a little bit below, you got let's say a 3.3, and they accept the 1500 and you're at a 1200, then you can't act like accept me or else, right? And so it really just depends on where you stand in relation to you. If you're in a position of power, you're above. If you're right where they're meeting, then there's some humility there. And then if you're a bit below, then it's kind of like, hey, I'm great. I hope you can see some of the ways in which maybe my SAT and GPA may not match up, but I am someone that is very unique and would be an asset to your university. So hopefully that helps to kind of figure it out. There's no really one answer, but it's understanding where you stand in relation to what they're looking for in a great candidate for their university.
Well said, Nick. And just
Thank
to
you
add
both.
to that, Amit, like my own personal experience with my son, he's somebody who feels might regret an ED, so he's choosing not to do an ED at all because he has more than one universities that are his dream universities, and he is not confident about getting in an ED, and he doesn't want to get stuck with an ED, which is very binding. So he's somebody who would regret his decision, and that's the reason why he's not doing an ED. I think again, it also boils down to individual students' preferences. Are they somebody who would be more content and happy with their binding decision versus not? Maybe that also plays into the ED decision.
Just one more thing to add on. This is a little bit maybe hard to come by, but if you can find statistics about how the college admits for early round versus regular round, right? So like, is their early round primarily legacy students or students with hooks or students who are athletic recruits? And like what percent of that is made up during ED versus regular? So like in my case for Stanford, it looked on paper as though there was a higher admissions rate for the early round, but in reality, if you're a student that has none of these hooks or entry points, like legacy or athletic recruitment or low income, right? Then you're actually at a disadvantage in the early round statistically, and it's actually not a good choice to apply early. So if you can find those things, then that's helpful. I was unable to find those things beforehand, so I ended up making a decision that I probably should not have.
Really appreciate that. And the mental framework that Nichalous talked about, signaling by the choice.
Absolutely. And Nick, speaking about technology, just wanted to reiterate that question again. What are the pitfalls that we as parents or students we should avoid in terms of what technology we should use so that we don't get rejected from the universities because we're using too much of AI or LLMs or whatever have you? What is your recommendation on technology?
So this is a pain point for me personally. So I do want to preface that I am very biased. And so my opinion right now is going to be coming from a place of bias. And it's because that as someone who's been in the education space for 20 plus years, as a school counselor, as someone who worked in an after school program, college access work, I've done all of it as it relates to supporting students with figuring out their post-secondary plans. I have always complained that our school system has been way behind where it's almost like we're insulated in the school space in terms of what we can use for technology, how we leverage technology. And then once you walk out the school building, you realize that technology is being used in all these other amazing, great ways And so I've often felt like education has been a space that has been slow to adopt um, ways to leverage technology, to understand how to leverage technology, and to implement technology into the systems that I think will support young folks. And so I'll preface that by saying that education as a whole, and I'm generalizing, has been a space that has not completely utilize the benefits of technology, generally speaking. In terms of AI, we are in a new space right now. I think AI is exciting and a place that, I remember being a teenager and dialing up to AOL and hearing that and being excited to like get onto the internet. And now we're in a space where we have tools like Gemini and ChatGPT, and there's a ton of different tools that we can use. And for me, my personal opinion is that they are here and there's nothing we can do about it. Figure out how to make the best use of it for yourself. And just like any tool, a butter knife can be used to put some butter on some bread, and you can use a butter knife to maybe screw a screw, or you could use a butter knife to hurt someone if you want. And so I think that any tool can be used in the way that the person intends it to be. It could be harmful, it can be useful, it can be maybe ambiguous. So for me, I look at AI and any tool that it exists to us is to figure out how to use it for you, how to best leverage it for you, how to make the best sense of it for you. And when we're speaking of AI, it's not going anywhere. And so if you are someone who is anti-AI, I would highly encourage you to figure out ways in which AI might be able to be useful in your life and world.
I'd like to open out the floor for any questions from the audience. If you have anything, you can post it in the chat or come off mute. We at Ask Sheldon, we plan to host these weekly, bi-weekly webinars to help communities navigate through this complex and confusing process of college admissions. Our goal is to not leave any child feel disconnected or lost or overlooked as they make one of the most important decisions of their lives. We are not a product, we are a mission, and I hope we get the support. If you have any questions related to college lists or essay reviews, extracurricular activities, or financial aid, simply ask Sheldon. Thank you so much, Nick and Sid, for spending your afternoon with us and giving us such deep and candid insights into your journeys. I'm extremely grateful. Thank you, everyone, for dialing in, and have a great rest of your day.